Hello, welcome back to another video on my 3D modeling journey. As you know from the previous video, I started my portfolio with the intention to go freelance and get clients in a few months or something like that. And we're doing 3 projects. Right now, I'm currently modeling a PlayStation 2 controller, and I'm excited. I think it went really well. We got a good block out at the beginning, a lot of experimentation. I'm happy where the topology is at the moment, and I've taken it as far as it needs to where I think I can start moving on to the rest of the model now. But the main thing is I need to get the grips for the controller modeled in this video as well. And I'm really hesitant because obviously it's hard surface, it's more of an organic shape. I've never really modeled anything like this before, and especially I'm conscious of lumps on the surface, especially because of a curved surface, and how the organic shape is going to fit into the rest of the model, because it goes from this curved cylindrical shape into the rest of the model. And once the grip is done, it should allow me to progress through the rest of the model pretty quickly. And obviously by the end of the video, I'll be able to show some renders and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna go over to my desk. We're gonna kick off with continuing with the controller, and we can just go from there. Okay, so we're back in the viewport, and I started with the grips. Now, it was really important for me to not overcomplicate this. I just wanted to get something down into the viewport as usual, and not really worry about proportions or making sure it's perfect or worrying about the right amount of edges or the topology. I did this 9 times. I really tried multiple different workflows to try and get the grip and the shape into there. I don't know, it was a little bit of a struggle because I didn't want to overcomplicate it by adding too many loop cuts, but then also by adding loop cuts, you're introducing lumpiness to the shape. So one of the best things I noticed though about conducting all these experiments and attempting and reattempting was each time I got better and better. Every time I created a new grip or started again, I was able to iterate and improve my process. But saying that, one of the main bottlenecks was figuring out how to connect the grip to the rest of the model, because I didn't only need to have the correct amount of edges, but I also needed the curvature to almost break away from its grip curvature smoothly. I eventually realized that my model wasn't nearly as prepared as much as I needed it to be for this kind of operation. Eventually I moved on to the buttons and punching those holes out. Now, I actually think I should have done this way earlier, especially because when you've got these holes in these panel breaks, it allows you to add loops that kind of get interrupted and stop them from running around the model. So it gives you a little bit more freedom and allows you to see workflows that you might not have been able to use originally. It's interesting as well how if you get stuck on a certain area of the model, it's good to go to a different area and kind of progress that section instead. And that's what it felt like for me when I was making the holes for the buttons, because it made it feel like the model was progressing in a forward direction even when I had been stuck on the grip or any other part of the model for quite some time. And I think that feeling of progression is something that's important in order for you to stay optimistic with your modeling and your progress and, your skill level. Especially when I finished the buttons and I zoomed out and it felt like it was now looking like a PlayStation controller. So all of this top section, I'm very happy with the topology. I feel like I've done it properly. I did just punch out these holes for the buttons. I got stuck and I thought, well, I might as well just do this anyway, but usually I would leave that until later. But the grips are so difficult. I've spent multiple 7-hour days just on this underneath section. I am trying to get this kind of form, this kind of structure to go on the underneath as well, there's just something about this that is not cooperating the way I want it to. It's very lumpy. Molding it is actually quite difficult, and I don't want to fall into the trap of getting stuck and then abandoning the project. This is really where you need to stick it out. You need to figure it out, because this is what's going to grow me as not only an artist, but also grow my eye for what works and what doesn't work. And I don't know, I don't think I picked the easiest thing to model for my first portfolio project, but we move. So there we go. It's been 3 hours and I've done it. Obviously, ignore this. I will obviously sort this out. This is a problem for future Cameron. But the main thing has been finished, which is this. Now, I think obviously I am going to subdivide as well, and subdividing will accentuate anything that's already there. So I will need to be careful about that. I'll probably need to... You can see that there is slight pinching ever so slightly where these two quads are. And then if I do this, it should... where is it? This one. I wanted it to flow around the edges like this. And you can see that I've got these kites here. So there's 2 kites there, and then there are also 2 kites here. So that's really what I was aiming for. Now you can see that the edge density is a little bit different, but that's also the difficulty of what I was having a problem with, because the amount of edges that are here doesn't exactly translate to what can happen on the bottom. And so in a way, I was having to break some of the rules that I've learned through the fundamentals of, the last couple of months, because, usually you want to keep everything quite uniform. You want to keep things, especially doing like the panel break, but something tells me that that's not going to be the hardest model I'm going to have to make on my 3D journey. Like when you finally complete something and you suddenly become like starving for food because you've just been doing this. Yeah, a lot of brain power, but yeah, now that that's done, I'm going to sort out this section and maybe just some of this, maybe adding extra loops just to get this to kind of flow down here a bit easier, and obviously sorting this out as well. Oh my god, I've got to do this as well. Ugh. The hardest part's done, as far as I can tell, so that's what I'm grateful for. Modelling the R1 and R2 buttons was one of my favourite sections of the model because it felt like I finally moved on to a different object. I'm also duplicating the faces and extracting them from the controller in order to get the similar shape, and then reducing some of the edges that weren't needed, and then testing different curvatures for the highlight, testing whether it needs a bevel at the top or whether it just needs a loop around the edges, whether I should just inset it and that's good enough. I really went back and forth, especially trying the black materials and the silver materials just in my solid view. In the end, I felt like the highlight and the curvature was right just to have a loop running around the circumference of the button, not exactly insetting or beveling the top edges. And of course, when I moved on to the R2 button, I went for a similar approach with that as well. Then it was time to move on to the more fun objects of the controller, and that was the joystick, the buttons, and the D-pad. So for the joysticks, I just subdivided a cube to maintain its quads and then extruded down from there, but the main thing I was focusing on was getting the curvature right, because I would say a staple for game controllers in general is the look and feel of the joysticks, and as someone who grew up playing a lot of video games, I feel like this is really important. After that, I moved on to modelling the buttons, but one thing I might go back and change is you can see here that my topology on these cylinders, the pole is sitting on the beveled line where the reflections are, and so I might actually just do an additional inset to move the pole from the edges just so the highlights remain smooth and they don't get interrupted or anything like that. And finally, I moved on to the D-pad buttons. So I started off with preparing the topology, just lining it all up, and then creating the cutouts with the insets and the extrudes to get that D-pad form, but I was really focused on making sure that the curvature was there, because we know that from a PlayStation controller, the buttons, they aren't really tack sharp, they're a little bit rounded, and so it was really important for me to get that. So when one of them was done, I moved the 3D cursor into the center of the D-pad and then just duplicated the topology in a circular fashion around the D-pad to duplicate that to the other areas. And then when making the D-pad buttons, I made sure to again keep that round nature to their shape, but they also have a little bit of an angle towards the center, so again it was important for me to get that as well. From there, I just again duplicated around the 3D cursor, but I do want to emphasize that obviously you can also just create instances of this, or you can also just mirror it, so I might actually go back just to lighten the amount of actual topology that's on the model, but for now it works. It was inevitable, but Blender crashed on me, and I did panic for a little moment because I couldn't remember the last time I saved my project. So in the end, I just had to pray that when I opened the project, it came back and it was exactly where it was. And unfortunately, it wasn't. I had to go into the autosave directory and bring back my autosave, and luckily, it just autosaved like maybe 2 minutes prior to it crashing. So make sure you save your work, guys. I'm interrupting the flow of this video with this so I can emphasize it, because I made a really big mistake that I do not want it to happen again, and I want to emphasize that to you guys watching. So if you remember at the beginning of the video, I mentioned how I wanted to, model and then subdivide, especially because I'm going to be doing close-up renders. However, somewhere halfway through the project, I decided, oh, maybe I can do details without subdividing. But there's a crucial thing that I completely forgot about. It's that I was going to do close-up renders. And so what I ran into was when I started to do close-up renders for this project at the very end, the reflections didn't hold up, the highlights were breaking, and it wasn't anything to do with the modeling, it was just because at that close-up of a render, the model wasn't a high resolution enough. And that's one of the most important fundamentals of 3D, is that you're supposed to model with the render in mind, with the context of what are you modeling for. So that was my mistake. Halfway through the project, I forgot that I wanted to do close-ups, or I for some reason just thought, oh yeah, I'll get away with it. Now, could I have just increased the resolution and done the renders and it would have been fine at the end? Yes. However, when I made the details on the lower mesh version, I localized topology for some of the buttons. Even though that's fine for this, if I was to subdivide later on after this localized topology had been done, then I would be getting subdivided localized topology. And obviously localized topology I didn't create with the intention of subdividing. And for me, this is a big lesson because it teaches me that you have to stick with what the render is going to be at the end. You have to model with that throughout the entire project, even if the project takes weeks or months. That seems like that's something pretty crucial. And so I can just imagine if you're working on a client project, maybe, would they want wide renders and then later on they want close-up renders, but we haven't modeled for close-ups? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm wondering how that works in a client project scenario, because I had to go all the way back to before I added the details, before I did the D-pad, before I did all the arrows and everything like that, and apply a subdivision at that point, so then I could go in again and recreate the details on the higher quality mesh. I also was a little bit concerned with the density that was in the center of the controller, because it did look quite densy around that section, but I did minimize the topology to the best I could without adding poles everywhere. So I'm hoping this looks okay. I am so excited to let you guys know that I did it. I finished the PlayStation 2 controller project. These are the renders that I've created for my portfolio, and I really focused on getting the wireframes done, and I've also got ones that are a little bit more of a creative angle. But my main focus was to have a more presentation style render, because I want people that are hiring me, like producers and agencies, to be able to see that I know what I'm doing. I did mention earlier in the video that agencies really care about workflow, speed, turnaround, communication, you know, all the things that they know that you know how to model. Like, that's not really their primary thing, but I do want to show them my thought process with that. So I'm hoping that these renders are good enough for what I need them to do. Again, like, with my knowledge and with my research, I believe this is right. Like, I would really love for someone to let me know if I'm missing anything in my portfolio. I think I would also maybe need to UV unwrap my model as well, just to show that it can be UV unwrapped in a decent way. Overall, I'd just like to take a moment as well to sit with my experience of making this model and talk about that. So there was a lot of moments where I was questioning, how am I getting stuck on a certain area? Why don't I know how to solve this part of the topology? Like, what's all this? And it was just really interesting how that stuff started to come to the surface again. I don't know whether I mentioned it earlier in the video, but with my video career, I am obviously very experienced, so I can trust my own instinct. I can trust my own intuition, like when to do something, if it's the right way to do it or whatever, or what rules I can break. But with 3D, is this right? I'm looking for someone else to give me validation as to whether the renders are right, as to whether I've modeled it correctly. And obviously that will start to kind of become more flexible, and I'll be able to bend it as my experience improves. So yeah, I'm really happy with the controller. I'm really happy that I was able to push through with this as well. It's been interesting to also feel how accomplished it can be again, to create something and push through something. There's not really that much that happens in my video career that I'm surprised by anymore, because most stuff I already know how to do. With this, it really felt like I put a piece of myself into this PlayStation controller. Now that I'm obviously putting out on the internet, and I'm going to obviously post it in some Discord groups and see if I can get some feedback from other 3D artists, it feels really good, but I also feel quite vulnerable, and I'm not used to this feeling. I feel more like an artist every day doing this. Yeah, I don't know, it's nice, it's really nice. The next video, what I'm going to be doing is going into my second portfolio project. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm thinking it might be a headphone, or it might be a keyboard, or it might be something like that. So yeah, I'll keep you updated on that. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you're not subscribed yet, please do. And if there's anything I've done with my modeling, or anything that you think can be improved with the wireframe or anything like that, please do definitely let me know, because like, I'm not trying to be an expert on here, trying to improve, I'm trying to learn, and hopefully with my previous videos you felt that as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.